you may be able to make a valid argument for that bug by setting AC to high, and then moving forward. So I see.
So what you're telling me is all of my blind XSSs that haven't popped are attack complexity high.
No, Joel, that's not the system being vulnerable is not one of the conditions.
They just haven't clicked it yet, dude.
Oh my God, Joel, please. Yo, sup everyone, this is Renorator popping in to remind you to set your CVSS integrity to high by subscribing to our YouTube channel at Critical Thinking Podcast. Drop us a follow on Twitter at CTBB Podcast, and subscribe, whatever it is you do on your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. Hope you guys enjoy the show. All right, well, I guess we'll start off with news today then, yeah?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's see, let's start with the NTLM hash leaking thing. So MDSec Labs, which I have not actually heard of before, released a write-up for a CVE that they found in Outlook. I almost said Exchange, but it's Outlook.
For once.
Yeah. And this is not particularly relevant to Bug Bounty, I don't feel, but also it I think is just a really good example of an attack vector for looking at actual desktop applications and looking at Microsoft Outlook. So from the perspective of you're hacking on Microsoft's program, I think it could be a really good write-up to read. Essentially, what happened here was they were reading, and I love how if you look at this write-up, literally in the docs, it's they're in the write-up. They have a screenshot from the docs that says specifies the file name of a sound that the client should play. And this just goes back to the precept that we've talked about time and time again of you got to read the freaking documentation, because sometimes there are bugs just sitting in there waiting to be found that you could literally just control F for.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's literally written in the docs. Yeah.
I remember the first live hacking event I went to. There was 20 minutes left in the live hacking event. This was Washington, D.C. And Schmeagles, a legend, was like, you know what? I'm going to go read the documentation with the last 20 minutes left. He literally went to the documentation for the target we were looking for, Control F for URL, found the first one, put it in there, and it was an SSRF, a full read so SSRF funny. At the event. And he submitted it within the last 20 minutes of the event.
So crazy. Definitely
bugs to be found there. This one I don't think is particularly, like I said, applicable to the bug bounty world. It's normally frowned upon to send an email at all in the bug bounty world. So please do not do that. Just to be clear, everyone, do not do that. This is an exercise of what it looked like to find a cool bug on Outlook. Read the documentation. They used a .NET message kit library to craft the correct file that they would need to exploit this, and then send that message along. And then when opened by Outlook, it would trigger the UNC path, which is an attack vector that we talked about before because it came up in a past live hacking event, is if you have any way to make a desktop application open a specified file path on Windows, then you can leak the NTLM v2 hash. And I personally think that that's quite impactful. It certainly, from a CVSS perspective, it affects confidentiality. And also, there's lots of other attack vectors if you're on the internal network, because you can just relay that authentication to a different system, and then gain access to further credentials or gain access to that system. So definitely a cool attack vector to be thinking of if you're looking at desktop applications.
Yeah, it's a super, super dope. I feel like it's one of those bugs that you read through and you're like, dang, I probably could have found that if I was looking at it.
Yeah, in 10 minutes,
Yeah, but,
yeah.
The key factor being you have to be looking at it.
You got to be looking, man. And that's kind of what I'm telling everyone with the World Cup as well, is sometimes you just got to put in the time, man. tweeted about it earlier, but I've got some of the guys on my team that are great, and they're out there. They're looking for the right stuff. They're doing the right things. There's no reason to justify, them not finding bugs, besides the fact that they're moving on too quickly and not diving deep enough and getting to those endpoints that are a little bit harder to reach. And so I told them, let's take another step deeper. Let's put at least 16 hours into a specific part of an application or a specific application before we move along. And if you don't have anything interesting after 16 hours, then maybe it's just not the target for you. So
Yeah. We can talk about World Cup in a little bit. Let's finish the news, and then we can definitely discuss that because we brought it up.
All right. What have we got? Let's jump down to the Snapchat report. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I feel like Snapchat a couple years ago was definitely like really popping off in the bug bounty scene because they had a couple different Jenkins instances and stuff that were open that were paying some crazy bounties back in the day.
Yeah.
But they are in the HackerOne feed again because somebody found a really, 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 really simple IDOR where it's literally just a numeric IDOR, and you're able to delete anybody's content off of their spotlight.
Yeah, no, very, very impactful. I'm actually I'm looking at their bounty brief. I'm kind of surprised I don't hear about them more often. Like, I feel like no one's looking at Snapchat, and they've only got 32K bounties paid in the last 90 days, and 15K of it was that one bug. So I think we might be sleeping on Snapchat, and yeah, so there could be some good scope here for sure. 4K minimum on mediums?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean,
Dang.
so the one thing I will say is that Snapchat's security team is pretty strong.
Oh, yeah.
I'd say probably one of the biggest reasons that you don't see a ton of bugs on them is that their mobile app is very, very hardened.
Oh, is it?
So as a result, you can do barely any like hooking or proxying or any of that kind of stuff without throwing off their signature signing algorithm that happens on every single request that goes out. So
do they do that? That's such a pain, man.
Yeah, and it's signed in a native library, and the native library does like anti-hook checks and all sorts of stuff. So
oh my gosh, that's insane.
I mean, Snapchat has a massive bot problem, so they did a lot of anti-botting features, like anti-botting features and stuff that end up stopping security research.
Stuff.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Do you know if they're using safety net?
They were, yeah. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I know so much about safety net is because, back in the day I used to write Snapchat bots. So
I was really surprised so I hit Joel up the other day. Normally I can nerd snipe Joel real easy and just be like, "Hey Joel, this looks impossible to solve." Like, wouldn't it be crazy if somebody solved it? And then Joel will just like deep dive and come up with a solution. So I was like, let me go read the DM. Hold on, let me see if I can pull it up. I think I said something along the lines of like, "Hey Joel, I think this is actually impossible to hook with Frida," or something like that. And your response was like, yeah, it's real hard.
Yeah.
And I was like, what?
Yeah. I mean, so all the safety net stuff is like, for those who don't know, safety net is essentially, it's an attestation library tool that's built into Android, and it allows you to generate these attestations that are signed at a kernel like system level that have a lot of different attributes about like the device. And it's originally, I believe it was meant for like profile matching, where basically like you want a certain device profile to be able to use your app, meaning that it has access to certain features and it's not compromised in certain ways. And if it meets that criteria, then you allow them to log in by verifying the attestation on the server side. The problem is that also gets used for like anti-rooting, anti-hooking, all that kind of stuff, because it's a very good library for detecting that kind of stuff. And as a result, if you verify it on the server side, there's basically no bypass because you can't bypass the server side check. So Snapchat has been using attestations for quite a while. Like I said, I used to write Snapchat bots back in the day, so that's how I'm so familiar with all this kind of stuff. We did spend some time, and we reverse engineered the safety net stuff down to like a level where we could generate a lot of it programmatically, and then it's just a cat and mouse game. Like at a certain point, they just keep updating it, and they keep adding more checks, and you have to keep trying to reverse engineer them and bypass those checks. And
it's the grind.
They can do it way faster than you can. So, yeah, it's definitely quite difficult. They also use this mobile security company who used to be, I don't know what they're called now. I think they rebranded, but they used to be called Arxan. and they were using them for quite a while to secure their native libraries from hooking and tamper detection, all that kind of stuff. So I would guess that is probably why their submissions are so low, is just because the barrier to hacking is like really, really high to actually like find vulnerabilities without triggering their anti-tamper stuff. But if you could get past that, and you could get some requests going through your burp without triggering their anti-tampering, then you'd probably find some cool bugs.
In this specific report, though, it's just they go through their website, mysnapchat.com. So maybe they're expanding a little bit into the web, scope a little bit more, and there might be some vulnerable endpoints out there, because I'm seeing also story.snapchat.com. So it seems like there's some decent functionality in a web app, not necessarily like one of those programs where it's just a mobile app. So definitely could be something to look into. Yeah,
actually within the last 6 to 12 months, they announced Snapchat Web, which is literally it's a web-based version of Snapchat, and you can do like a lot of the same features that you can on the app but through the web. So my guess is that one, that attack surface is kind of ripe, and two, they're probably not doing the same level of security stuff that they are on the mobile app just because they can't. So if you could figure that out, again, you might find some really dope bugs.
Really cool stuff there. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about this, on the same topic, was I got an email. I signed up for the Bug Bounty Explained stuff from, I'm going to butcher this guy's name. Yeah, I'm not even going to try. I'm sorry, dude. But the guy that does Bug Bounty Reports Explained, and he dropped an email outlining IDORs. And like he went and analyzed 187 different reports, and like sorted them into different categories, pulled statistics on bounty, pulled statistics on what type of ID was being used, all that stuff, and put it into this like newsletter that he sent out. And I love stuff like this. I totally get off on stuff like this with all this data and like analytics on vulnerabilities. So that was the first newsletter of his that I actually sat down and read, and I was really impressed with it. So definitely, I think he's pushing out some really awesome content. So go check that out if you're interested in getting that delivered to your inbox every once in a while.
Yeah, it's super cool to see that kind of data. I think like a really data-driven approach to bug bounties is kind of a good idea. Just get an understanding for what are other people finding, how are they finding it, what are the common attack scenarios. Because you'll find that many, many times bugs are basically the same thing, just copy-pasted on a different program. Yeah, for sure. Oh, dude, I actually just clicked back to the IDOR, and mandatory works for Snapchat. Did you know that? Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, is that where he went from after Uber?
He went there, then he left. He did a startup with some of my buddies, and then he left the startup and he went back to Snapchat.
Gotcha. Yeah. Nice. I'm glad to see his face back in the community there. That's fun.
Did you notice that Ape Pfeiffer's there too?
Who, really?
Yeah, really. I haven't seen that guy in a couple years.
They do have a built team, don't they?
Yeah, they have a pretty dope team. I think I actually almost joined there too.
Jeez. Yeah, then you could get on the inside and like see all the places where your bots were getting foiled.
I know, for real.
Serious
I
incentive.
just done it.
All right, cool. So let's see what else we got on here. Okay. This is just going to be a quick little rant. So let me just talk about Jubob's tweet. Talked about Jubob a couple times on the podcast before. He tweeted out the other day, in most cases described as user enumeration, you can only ask yes or no questions, essentially, about whether some email addresses exist in the system. In such cases, I would encourage you to favor the term user existence oracle, which is more precise. Totally agree with this take. I don't think a user existence oracle is a vulnerability. I do think a user enumeration vulnerability, which is one that allows you to either iteratively or just all in one big chunk disclose all of the users signed up for a service. I do think that is more of a vulnerability. What do you think about that, Joel?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those great bugs that you can use to chain with another bug. So for sure. Say you have a password reset bug or a account takeover, but you need to know the user's username, or you need to know an account that exists, or you need to know an account that doesn't exist. That's a bug that I've had a couple times. This would be a great bug for proving that, where the team could easily say, well, how do you know that an account exists? How do you know an account doesn't exist? Well, here's another bug that I found that shows it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can also use it in some cases to determine what kind of direction you want to go with, like for example, if it leaks a user ID or something like that, that can be really helpful for validating other attacks. So definitely cool thing. I don't know, man. I feel like user existence Oracle is a little bit wordy. I might just say user Oracle.
Yeah.
But I like the concept, so I wanted to shout it out.
Yeah. I think user Oracle is probably a little more concise, but either way, I think it's a good distinction to be making, and it'll help improve your bugs and sort of let you chain that stuff together. Now that you mentioned, I was actually thinking, I have seen in the past where if you get like an endpoint that you give like an email or something and it errors out and it'll be like, you don't have access to user ID. And then they just put
in the errors. Sometimes it pops up like that. Good to keep an eye out for sure. Yeah,
those error messages are always very leaky.
Yeah. Another tweet that popped up this week that kind of caught my fancy was anytime James Kettle tweets anything, I jump right on that. I think he's one of the few people that like actually tweets. Yeah, I do. I have tweet notifications turned on for him because he's not like, there are some people out there that push out some really quality tweets, but they also like respond to every message, and stuff like that. So you can't put on tweet notifications for them. But for James, I definitely do. And he posted, he tagged HackerOne, BugCrowd, and Integrity and said, hey, why are we not standardizing what it looks like to have a HTTP header that identifies a specific ethical hacker to an organization so that they can easily search that in the IP logs. I thought that was a great idea. And then Alex Chapman down below just kind of says, he dropped a take on one of the programs out there does where you check in, and I think that's another way to deal with the problem. But I really liked the recommendation further down in the comments that says this could also help with verification if you like put a key out there or you sign the header with something to prove that it's you. I think that could be really cool to prevent black hats from putting X-ethical hacker : Runerator in their header and
right.
and impersonating me, and then also dodging some logs when they're actually doing some sketchy stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see more standardization across the bug bounty programs in general, the platforms in general.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of room where they could be working together instead of competing and making things better for the whole community. But I think a lot of it gets sort of caught up in corporate politics and whatnot. For
sure. Yeah, that definitely does happen.
Which probably brings us to our next topic, aka CVSS, right? Let's talk about like improving structural parts of the bug bounty reporting process. Like CVSS is probably one of the most flawed systems that they have. I see so many programs that rely entirely on CVSS as like their entire system for paying out bounties and determining severity, and it's like, what? I don't know a single company that has a threat model that's 1-to-1 with CVSS.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know, man. I kind of like, I have a love-hate relationship with CVSS. Like anything else, it's got problems, and thus we can hack it. So there are some scenarios where it's like, all right, this attack is largely let's say an availability-based attack, right? We're DOSing an account or something like that. But it also like leaks a little bit of information, right? And so there's definitely ways, and that would give a bump on the CVSS score due to it affecting the confidentiality metric. And so I think there's also some other ways you can creatively sort of chain attacks together to try to gain higher impact in the CVSS scoring system. So I think the companies like, I'll just shout them out because everyone knows already, PayPal and Shopify, they stick very closely to CVSS. I think a lot of times you can work that to your advantage. So I don't mind it quite as much when they do that, but also it's the times when the programs downgrade it below CVSS when they feel like it, and then stick to CVSS when you can't get it any higher. That's annoying.
Yeah, 100%. Maybe this is one of those things that you have a little more context and insight on as a full-time hacker.
Yeah.
What are like the most like ripe areas that you can just like increase availability, for example, or something from
Sure.
none to.
Yeah, that's a good question, man. Let me think on that. Well, one of the ones that comes to mind is the privilege required. So one, a lot of times you can just argue with the team about that and say like, hey, if it's a self sign up account, it shouldn't be PR low. There is evidence for that in the standard. If you read it, I had a long debate with a HackerOne triager on Twitter one time about this, and I was pretty happy with the results. I think I found some evidence, in the standard that really supports my position of self sign up accounts being PR none instead of PR low. So that's one way, but also if it is actually PR low, and the company has already established, hey, the self sign up accounts are PR low, we're not budging on that, then sometimes you can actually fudge it a little bit and try to get your attack to be used. So there are some hybrid states sometimes in web applications, which I think are really cool, where like you're a guest, but they like issued you like this guest account so that you can check out or something like that, or like some ghost account somewhere so that it can save your preferences or something like that. And then in the flow later, it converts it to a full account. One, those are great spots to attack anyway, because anytime they're signing up for an account without actually having an account and you're getting a different account type, then that's a great place to look. But also those ghost accounts, you may be able to weaponize those much easier. You might be able to just hit an endpoint and get a cookie and use those to hit some of the other endpoints that would result in your bug. So that's definitely one way to do it.
Nice. Yeah, no, I think that's a super interesting way to look at it. I feel like I totally agree with you. Like self sign up, it's like, listen,
I don't know why we're debating this anymore in the industry. I really don't.
I mean, it's like nothing is stopped. Like the same amount of nothing that's stopping me from doing an unauthenticated account is what's stopping me from signing up and then doing that request. Like
exactly.
There's no barrier. The barrier is just one extra step that requires me to do something for free with no verification, right?
Yeah. And there are some scenarios, I think, where companies will say, and this is another one of the ones that you might be able to get around, but there are scenarios where a company will say, hey, if you have to verify your email, then that is PR low. And so sometimes you can get PR none by signing up for an account with not a verified email and accessing the same functionality and then kind of rolling with it that way. So there's definitely some ways to eke it out. One of the other things that I kind of wanted to shout out, since we're talking about CVSS, is the attack vector metric, which for most of my career as a bug bounty hunter, I've just kind of been selecting network and moving on. But as I started looking a little bit more at like hardware devices and stuff like that, I noticed that there are these adjacent network, local, and then physical sort of sections as well. And they don't actually decrease the impact of the vulnerability super much. So if you have a company that does CVSS for their ratings, and you have their physical devices that you can look at, you can make a strong argument for a decently scored vulnerability based off of selecting these metrics, realizing telling the company to realize that there are accommodations already made in the standard for this. And kind of selling it that way, and that's something I mean, like I said, I've been doing bug bounty for 5-6 years, and I just found out about that within the last year. So,
yeah, I think that it reminds me. There's CVSS 3 extended, I think it's called, which is like extra layers on top of CVSS to try and make it more specific, and it's one of those things that like if you were to do it for every single bug, you would probably go insane because it's so much effort and work and being like, which category does this fall under? And like all that kind of stuff, where it should be just like, look at what the impact of this bug is. Is it a high or a crit? You know what I mean? But I don't know. I just feel like it's trying to make something fit like every scenario that can't fit every scenario. You know what I mean? Just like leave it as it is, and
I feel that. I also, I won't, I tweeted about the program. So if you really want to be a sleuth, then you can go figure it out who it is. But there's a specific program that doesn't use a platform that I hack on from time to time. And they do not use this. They use the OWASP rating system. And it is impossible to get a critical vulnerability in that system. Like it literally is. Like there's just like you could be holding you could be in their bank account transferring money away, and this would be a medium. Like, it's kind of nuts, man. So, I was a big hater on CVSS for a while, and then I went and saw the alternatives, and I was like, you know what? CVSS ain't so bad now that I come to think of it. So,
oh, this is super wild. I'm just looking into this. This is the first I don't think I've ever even heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not super popular, thank goodness. But yeah, I definitely like CVSS more. The other thing, let's see, what else are there ways to escalate the CVSS? The other thing is the attack complexity piece. I think is misunderstood a lot, and it's helped me make some pretty good arguments for vulnerabilities that are sort of, I believe, are dangerous, but are also sort of on the fringe of whether they are, accepted in a bug bounty program or not. And the whole concept behind attack complexity is this metric meant to impact the vulnerability score based off of whether there is some condition outside of the attacker's control that needs to be in place. And so, for example, if you are missing, a piece of the equation or something like that, you may be able to make a valid argument for that bug by setting AC to high, and then moving forward. So I see. So
what you're telling me is all of my blind XSSs that haven't popped are attack complexity high.
No, Joel, that's not the system being vulnerable is not one of the conditions.
They just haven't clicked it yet, dude.
Oh my God, Joel, please. Let me give an example for this so that the community doesn't misunderstand what I'm trying to say here. Okay. So actually, this is a great. So you may have seen on Twitter the Rezo talking about UUID IDORs. Props to Rezo for that. Thank you for taking the flag and leading the troops and making the case for UUID IDORs, because I do think that there is absolutely a large impact to those. And we've seen time and time again on programs that use UUIDs, they've got like metric endpoints that like dump all of the UUIDs. And then like once an attacker compromises that, if an attacker goes to that page once and sees that, now they've got all the IDs. And those things don't expire, especially when it's, objects that are permanent in the system. So they can go back and utilize those. And yeah. So anyway, without going on a whole rant, if you're having trouble with a team, about UUID IDOR, one way that you could approach that is by setting attack complexity to high. Your severity will take a hit for that, for sure. But I also think it's sort of fair because the exploitation scenarios for UUID IDORs are substantially less than enumerable IDORs, enumerable ID IDORs. So that's another argument that I've made, utilizing CVSS in my favor as an attacker, which that's kind of like the thing that I wanted to talk about with this session was like how a lot of times when we submit a bug, we see it get downgraded and we get disappointed. What are the ways that we can utilize CVSS to make a good argument for our bugs to be accepted in a bug bounty context? So hopefully some of the tips we drop will sort of help with that. One of the things I will say, though, and Joel, maybe you've got a better perspective on this than I do, is I still don't fully understand scope. Do you understand scope in CVSS?
Yeah. So I think it's meant to be like, does this breach across systems? Meaning like, do I get like, if originally I would have access to one thing, does my scope of access increase as a result of this bug? Like, do I get access to like another user's bank account if I could only know they exist or something?
Like I don't know, because it says, and I quote, about changed in scope. In this case, the vulnerable component and the impacted component are different. And I've seen, and I know you're supposed to set scope to changed on XSSs, because there's a browser component, that's the impacted component, and then the vulnerable component is the web application. But outside of that, like, what if I've got like a bug that allows me to, or blind XSS is a great example. Blind XSS, that would be scope change for sure, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Because like if it's triggering on like an admin panel in the back end or something like that, then that's totally different.
Right.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, I think that's the way that I would view it. Yeah, I don't know. It's like one of those weird things where it was probably created for a specific reason. Like I'm sure they had a specific something in mind when they were like, we need to add scope into the CVSS score.
Yeah.
I'm just not really sure what it was and why it was such a thing that made it so it's in like the main factors of a CVSS. I don't know.
Yeah.
On the topic of UUIDs real quick. So Uber used UUIDs. And that was something that came up a lot in our bug bounty program when I worked there, where oftentimes people would submit an IDOR and it would be like, well, it's a UUID. So do you have like a user ID Oracle or something?
I remember being on the receiving side of that message.
Yeah. So I think like I definitely see both sides of it. I think from an engineering perspective, like it's very easy to argue like you can't enumerate IDORs or sorry, you can't enumerate UUIDs. So you need some other way. However, that being said, like we talked about, user existence Oracle or a UUID getting leaked in an error message or email to UUID, like very simple IDOR that doesn't give any info but their ID, right? Like any of those types of things you could chain into a much more severe bug by taking your IDOR that has a UUID and now removing the UUID mitigating factor, right?
Yeah.
And now you've just raised your severity significantly.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a great reason to keep, these UUID enumeration sort of IDORs in your pocket and be able to use them, at different times. The most convincing argument that I've heard, though, for engineering in that scenario is that what if I took that UUID and I put it in an authorization bearer or put it as your session token, right? Then it would just be like you're swapping cookies, and that's not a bug. And I was like, okay, wait a second, though. Like, that sort of makes sense, but it's not doing it for me. Like, and the reason for that, and let me explain the reason for that. The reason for that is that these IDs are not treated like sensitive material, right? They're treated like IDs, and they're put in URLs, and they're put, in logs and stuff like that. So I don't necessarily think that this, that argument follows all the way through, because your threat model isn't surrounded around protecting IDs. Okay, there it is. It came out. That's what I've been meaning to say this whole time. Your threat model isn't built around protecting these IDs and these being sensitive pieces of information, so you shouldn't treat them like they are. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, no, 100%. Like, severity should be basically impact, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the way that I view it, and I think that's how most programs should do it. Like CVSS is a semi-proxy to allow you to determine like impact to some generic extent.
Yeah.
However, it should really be like, what does it mean within your company?
Yeah.
Like if you work at Uber, what does it mean for someone's UUID to be leaked? Can they access that full user's object? Can they just log in as that user? Like, what does it mean within the context of Uber? It doesn't matter. Like, is this a UUID? Like, are UUIDs brute forceable? Okay, so what? It doesn't matter, right? Like, are your UUIDs brute forceable?
Right.
Like,
right.
is there an Oracle that makes it so I can IDOR any account, regardless of the fact that you're using a UUID? Right? It doesn't matter if the mitigating factor is there if it doesn't actually do anything.
Yeah.
Right?
No, absolutely. Yeah. Man, I don't know. I think we've highlighted. I hope we've done a good job of representing the highs and the lows of CVSS.
We're gonna have 15 different programs that are email inbox.
I know,
being
man. This
CVSS
is a very controversial topic. I remember, I'm not one to really like get in the Twitter wars, but like when I did get in that Twitter war about CVSS, I was like in the weeds with it, man. Like I don't know. There's definitely some
you're in the docs, like pulling up the official definition.
It was like I was having a debate with my wife or something, But no, one other on the topic of gripes with CVSS, I did have one more thing that I wanted to say though. I'm a little frustrated by the impact metrics, so confidentiality, integrity, availability, only having two settings, low and high. I think there should be maybe two settings and then a modifier, and here's why. Because, so say you've got a scenario where let me pull an old bug that doesn't exist anymore out of the hat. Say you've got an SSTI, okay? You include a script, that script is dynamically generated, and it leaks to you 3 pieces of information: the user's name, email, and phone number, right? Okay? That is a user interaction required bug. So it's not something that, affects users arbitrarily. If it was an IDOR that leaked those same pieces of information, I would make an argument for confidentiality high because it affects every single user in the system. But it's confidentiality low because it's just, it requires user interaction, affects the one user, not mass exploitable. Now, let's say you had a different bug, a bug that was an IDOR that affected all users and leaked credit card information, right? I think there should be, that's a super high. That's a super, high impact confidentiality impact bug there. And so I think there should be a modifier on these to be whether this component, this impact metric, is impacted at a scale across the application, or whether it's just localized to the specific user. And yeah, I don't think user interaction required fully cuts that, does that well enough to warrant all scenarios. So it would be great if there was another modifier for those metrics, I think.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that like you could certainly spin it to be like user interaction is required, but you could also spin it so that it like what do you count as user interaction and like where do you draw that line?
Yeah.
Like it's super fuzzy where it's like high, low, none. Like I don't know.
Yeah, and I was hoping to see some of these problems fixed with CVSS version 3.1, but
is that when they added the extended fields or?
I'm looking right now. I see. So I think it's called. Maybe we're talking about different things, but I'm seeing environmental score. Is that the thing you're talking about?
I think that might be what it is.
Yeah. So actually, maybe I should sit down and look at all these different things that they've added to the environmental score and stuff like that. See if anything's changed substantially because, I guess I have not super well acquainted with CVSS 3.1 because HackerOne uses CVSS 3.
Yeah, it's the temporal and the environmental metric groups. Those are the additional ones, I believe, that are like report confidence, confidentiality required, availability required, base metric modifications. Like,
yeah, man, that would be a lot of forms to click. I think even now, oftentimes I just use the low severity, medium severity, high severity, critical severity rating on HackerOne and don't go through the whole thing for the CVSS just because it's really, it's a lot of buttons to click for sure.
It's a lot of buttons.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. It's like I shouldn't have to be it should be pretty obvious. You know what I mean? Like this feels like a crit. Why? Because it's a crit. What do you like?
Leaking credit card information.
Yeah, this is a critical. I think anybody who worked at the company would be able to be like, that's bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel very conflicted about it. I see both sides for sure.
Yeah. So those are the takes on CVSS. Just to summarize real quick, we talked about using attack complexity to your advantage. We talked about trying to pivot privilege required low to privilege required none through two techniques. One, through talking to the team about what PRL actually means, and then also through using guest accounts or ghost accounts to pivot privilege required into none rather than low. We talked about what scope means, which is new for me. I appreciated that little explanation there, Joel. And also we talked about the attack vector metric and using that to your advantage when you're hitting the physical applications or the physical devices. So definitely keep all those in mind when you're rating your vulnerabilities.
Yeah, that's also something that comes and bites you a lot with mobile vulnerabilities. With the access required is often like local or physical. Yeah. Because like you need like an app or something like that that's on the device, or like you have to pick up somebody's phone in a coffee shop, and it's like they're really bad bugs and they're not like outside of the realm of like possibility. It's just that like when you start to put it into the system that isn't really designed for like all of these bugs, you get some kind of weird results.
Yeah. And but like from a mobile app perspective, what is your threat model for a mobile app? Besides like them coming to a page, clicking a link, and then it, using deep links, kind of like we talked about on the deep link episode, there's not really a network vector, because it's not like they have like public IPs or anything like that. They're on a local network, or they're on a cellular network, or you need to get your hands on it or hit it via Bluetooth or something like that.
Well, there is that bug that I talked about, right? So like the Shopify bug that I found where you have to
true.
intercept somebody's traffic on the local network.
Mm.
That's kind of an instance, but a lot of the time it would be like either no access or maybe like physical access with like a bank if you bypass their PIN or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. All right, I think that covers most of the news topics in the CVSS. You want to talk about some reports?
Sure. Yeah. So this is I teased you with this a little bit.
Yeah, dude. I want to hear this. I'm excited for this.
Okay. So here's the story. Basically, Fisher and I, Fisher, amazing hacker. We
Love that guy.
we were having a totally unrelated conversation. I won't go into the details, but basically, I had lent him some cash. He paid me back via PayPal. And when he sent me the payment back, he was like, not a payload or whatever, like in his message or whatever. And he just put like, some curly braces and I saw it in my inbox and I was like, oh, that's funny. Okay, whatever. And then, hour or two later, I go, I'm like sitting on the toilet, just like scrolling through my phone, looking through my notifications. And I see a notification on my phone. It says you received, X dollars from Fisher. And underneath it, it says not a payload, 66 instead of 33 times 2. And I was like, oh shit. And so like literally in the report, the first image is me messaging Fisher going, dude, holy shit, it popped.
It worked. Dude, that's so clutch.
And I sent him 2 screenshots. So we pulled in, we were like really messing with this because we weren't sure where it was triggering. We weren't sure if this was on the phone or if it was
was it a
on
notification you said?
Yeah, so it was
Weird.
It was like in the notification in like your notification center. So it would be like you received a payment, and then underneath it with the message there would be like your template injection.
Huh.
And so we were poking at it. We were trying to figure out where it was. And it turns out, it was server-side template injection, SSTI.
Oh, nice.
And I actually found it today. It was a CVE, not one that we found, but
really?
It was one from a little bit earlier that I hadn't even heard of. So I guess they must have figured this out after the fact because I don't think we ever actually mentioned it in the report that it was a CVE. But we were able to get local file inclusion. We were able to read Etsy password off of the server, and it was super dope. We got 26 grand for it.
No way, dude! You guys made so much more money than that transfer from person to person. That's crazy.
Yeah, no kidding. And we pulled in Andre for like the final push because he was helping us exploit the SSTI.
Yeah.
And like I said, afterwards I was just pulling up this bug, and sure enough, they have it linked to a CVE. It's CVE 2020-12-668, and it's
12.668.
Yep, and it's in Gin Java before 2.5.4. It allowed you to inject into the template and load arbitrary Java methods, passing in the context, and that's how we popped it. I don't think we actually knew that it was a CVE. We kind of just built our own payload out of pure exploration. So, super, super dope bug. It's one of those instances where like definitely was not looking for a vulnerability or anything. It just sort of showed itself out of nowhere. One of those really cool exploit scenarios.
Yeah, I totally love that, man. Whenever you find an opportunity to hack on a product that you actually use, there's so much more understanding of the threat model, of the attack vectors, of, oh my gosh, look at that. He just sent me the payload. That's crazy. That's so funny. But there's so many different ways that the application better than just a tester, right? So I'm and I told this to the people I'm working with on the World Cup as well. If you can go after of the targets that we've got, if you have any relation to any of the pieces of the target, you should go after that because you understand that application so much better. You understand the use cases. You understand the fringe functionality. As a user, you have a totally different perspective, and that really should be one of the top priorities of an application tester, I believe, is to fully understand the user and what kind of things that they're going to be doing, what kind of things they're going to be prioritizing, and try to align yourself with that as much as you possibly can. That will definitely lead to some cool bugs like you guys found here. So that's sick, man. Congrats.
Yeah, it was actually paid as a crit too, which is super wild. So
dude,
crit on PayPal.
Okay. So we're going back to the CVS thing here for a second. Why do people think LFIs should, or LFDs? Let me be clear. LFDs. Why do people think LFDs should be highs? I feel like
instead of a crit.
Yeah, dude. I think that's such a crit bug.
I mean, you basically have source code access, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. Like, I think it's one of those cases where maybe you get locked into CVSS or.
Yeah.
I don't really know.
Well, it was PayPal, right? So they do lock it into CVSS, but they gave you a crit anyway. But I guess SSTI, you're actually running code on the server, so that's different.
That's true. I'll actually tell you. Okay, so here's the CVSS calculation: attack vector network, attack complexity low, privileges required low.
Let me get the calculator up. Okay, so network. Okay.
Attack complexity low.
Okay. Yep. No
privileges required low.
Okay, so they gave you low on that. No, none. That's interesting.
Yep. User interaction none.
Okay.
Scope changed.
Absolutely.
Confidentiality high.
Of course.
Integrity high.
Yep.
Availability none.
Availability none. Okay, so that puts you at a 9.6.
Yep.
Nice, dude. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I would say, I think it should be a 10 because I don't think privilege required. Well, actually, I take that.
It's like, what stops me from creating a PayPal account and sending, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but you have to put money on it. So you're going to have to link a bank account to it.
But we were testing with 1 cent. It's like.
Oh, were you really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but here's the other thing. You actually, can you receive money on PayPal if you've not added a payment method if someone sends it to you?
Yeah, because it just goes in your PayPal balance.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean that should totally be feasible to build a pay someone in Bitcoin, get sent to your PayPal account, and then exploit it that way. Yeah. No, I disagree with the PRL on that. And the other metric is that PayPal does get $20 to sign up, or that was their whole gimmick actually back in the day when they first started, was like, if you sign up, we'll give you $10 for free, which was brilliant marketing gimmick, by the way, legendary. But yeah,
free money if you sign up.
Yeah.
The Uber method.
Not as much money as you're getting after that, but
so. That's true. Yeah, it's funny because you mentioned you were saying like you should really focus like as if you're the user on like those high impact areas.
Yeah.
And like I think that's how as like a hacker you should really view severity, right?
Yeah.
Think about it from the company perspective. Think about it from the impact scenario. Again, like if I'm Uber, what are the things I care about the most? User data, like trip data, location data,
location,
like all these types of things. So as an attacker, what should I be focusing on? User data, location data, sensitive data, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's tempting too, because a lot of times and it's also from the company's perspective, it's also a little bit interesting because sometimes the employees aren't as aligned with, or the threat model isn't as aligned with the business's use cases either, because there have been some times when I've been like, hey, literally this bug that I found invalidates your whole business model. Like there is no business model with this bug. Like you make no money, right? But that, it gets put as a low or a medium.
Put that as a 5.3.
Yeah, that says low to me. And yeah, so I think there's.
I know you had unfiltered access to our admin panel.
Yeah,
but the CVSS put this as a medium.
User interaction really, really required. No, okay. Yeah. So, all right, we're done with CVSS. CVSS, we love you. CVSS, we hate you. Which one is it? You'll never really know.
Yeah, both.
Yeah. Joel, why don't you hit your second report right away as well? We're going to talk a little bit now about web cache deception, because we told you guys on the podcast that we would be doing that in the future. And so we've got 3 reports today that we're going to talk through. I don't know. My 2 are kind of similar, so I'm not sure I'll do all the way through both of them. But yeah, why don't you drop that one from a while back?
Yeah, sure. So this was from a couple years ago. I think it was at maybe a live hacking event.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I think it was a live hacking event. I was working with, we were actually kind of all working together. We were the big disturbance team. But Andre and I were the ones who were primarily working on this specific bug. And we found an endpoint that was basically doing caching incorrectly. So one of the API endpoints on TechCrunch allowed you to hit it with like the specific parameter that would change how it was being cached. And so as a result, we could actually cache it for one user, and it had this sensitive token in there. And then you could hit it from somebody else's, URL within the same data center. So we would hit one endpoint, get it to cache this user's token, and then we would take that cached URL with like a unique parameter attached to it so that we know exactly what it is. And then we would load it within an iframe. We'd pull that token out, and then we could use it to pull, PII. We had their full address. I think we had some credit card information.
Wow.
But yeah, it was really cool. It was actually a high, and I think that was probably because there were some limiting factors where basically, like I talked about, it needed to be sort of within the same like data center / location. So for this event, it was, we were geolocated in the same area, so we were testing from the same servers, so it popped easily for us. But I think if you were somewhere else, you would probably have to hop on a VPN. But like,
shouldn't have put that in the report, man. Everyone was going to be in the SF area, so
That's true.
This live hacking event, man, because like you said, we were both there, seeing these reports come in from OXACB, and this was the event that opened my eyes to web cache deception, because there were like three really, really impactful bugs at this event from Andre and you on web cache deception, and then so I left that event with one takeaway of like, I need to know how to do this bug, and it's super easy. So definitely, keep an eye out for that. So let me just refresh it for the viewers here, and you can correct me if I got anything wrong.
Sure.
So you create a malicious page. When the user goes to that page, you craft a URL, and then you send that. You make you force browse that in the victim's browser. What will then happen is the victim's cookies will be used to generate that dynamic response. And because of the way that you encoded something in the URL, in this case, what was it? Did you put anything? Oh, you didn't even really have to put anything in there, did you? You didn't have to put, like a lot of times you'll have to put like .jpeg or something like that at the end of the URL. You didn't even have to do that in this scenario. The cache prevention query parameter. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you set up this cache prevention query parameter, you get that value, and then when the page is dynamically, generated, it gets sent back to the victim, and it gets cached on the edge server, right? So now that cached server, if you hit that exact URL from any, IP address in the San Francisco area or whatever, then it will load that user's page response, the response that was shown to the user in their session with their cookies, to you without any cookies or anything like that.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep, exactly.
Solid. And then from there, you would take that link data and do something malicious with it, and
use it to like fetch. Yeah, exactly. PII.
Awesome, dude. Yeah. No. Standard web cache poisoning. Actually, this one's a little bit easier than normal, because you don't even have to do any tricky stuff.
Yeah, it's really just like get them to cache this thing, and that's it. Solid.
I've got one that kind of takes a little bit of a different approach to it. So this was a government target that I was working on. And somewhere in the application, and so I will note as well, you guys have to look, when you're looking for this, you're looking for a lot of times what you'll be looking for is the age header in the response, which shows how old this page is, and something like a cache hit or a cache miss, anything but a cache dynamic, right?
Yep.
And if you can see that, and it's on an asset that contains and that page contains user information, then you've got a web cache deception vulnerability here. Yep. So as I'm looking around in applications, one of the things I always map out is where in the application this caching is occurring. Because sometimes they'll set specific paths, like, /assets is always going to cache anything that ends in JavaScript or everything that ends in JS, right? So then, I might hit a URL that's like assets / /user or /API/user /info, right? And then, .json or .js or something like that. And then that will trick the front-end system, or the front-end, just to be clear, the front-end proxy, so the caching server, into caching that asset. And that's kind of what happened here. This was a technique that I learned from Andre as well, is that at the end of, and this actually happens a lot in ASPX sites. I don't know why, but when you're dealing with an ASPX application, I see it quite often. After you put the endpoint, whatever .aspx, you put a percent or a URL encoded question mark, so %3f. And then you put, a random string and then the caching extension. So if you're going to, it could be a JS, could be a PNG, could be CSS. It depends on their configuration. That's something you've got to find out in the application. Then if you do see that come back with a cache miss or a cache hit, then, you've got a vulnerability there. And you can just generate a random string, throw it in the URL, force a victim to go to that, and then visit that same URL from an unauthenticated perspective as the attacker and pull back that information. So that's what I had here. The reason I wanted to highlight it is because of that %3f piece, putting that in the URL, tricking the URL into thinking that the actual path ended in .js rather than .aspx, which what it was originally.
Yeah, that's a really cool one. I mean, like you mentioned, caching is often used for assets, right? It's for JavaScript, images, the types of stuff that you don't want to be reloading, right? It's supposed to be cached, right? Mm-hmm. And if they make a mistake and they're caching user data in some sense, whether that be a token or anything that's like specific, user specific, that's not like a generic asset, like that's definitely a huge risk for web cache deception and web cache poisoning where
and so the origin of all this, the origin of the problem with this is it's caching, like you're saying, content types essentially that it shouldn't be, right? So, most of the time, the reason why this configuration occurs is because the caching server is making a caching decision based off of the URL rather than based off of the response content type.
Right.
And so that's definitely, if you can find a way to validate that, changing, even if you can get an HTML page to cache anywhere, that's a big red flag, and seeing if you can, try to trick the server into caching the wrong HTML page.
Yeah. Now, the one thing I will say, because I feel like semi-obligated to mention this, if you're doing this sort of testing, you make sure that you're putting like a random URL parameter or something on the end, because if you accidentally poison a production website using just like a regular URL that's used in production, you're going to start leaking real people's data, and that's not good. The program's not going to be happy. So if you see something that's like using caching and you're like, I think I could probably poison this, put like $AAAAA or something at the end, right? Like make it a unique URL so that if it does cache, you can still test it with your like $AAAAA at the end, but just make sure that you're not using like the standard URL, because you're going to get some angry program emails probably.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think cache is one of those things like DNS where it's like, okay, is it DNS? No, it's cache then, for sure. Yeah. And so there's definitely ways to mess that up a lot, and it's definitely possible. I actually will shout out Loom, which is a company I use, by the way. I really like Loom. But they had a caching problem recently, and it caused a whole security incident, right? Because I think people were getting...
Yeah, we talked about this last week, I think.
Yeah. So that's another place where you can see that in place, and if you don't test responsibly, you could cause that problem for 100%. These giant companies.
I've seen it happen time and time again. It is it's kind of a really gnarly situation to put yourself in. So just be careful when you're doing your testing, and either don't test on prod or test very safely on prod.
Yeah, for sure. I have one other one. I'm looking at it right now. I'm not even sure whether it's worth diving into, to be perfectly honest, because it's so similar. Well, I'll just walk through it real quick. So this is on an airline company. This one's a little bit different because instead of having the %3f at the end, like I did last time, which kind of tricked it into caching it, because it appeared to the edge server, the caching server, that the file type was JavaScript or whatever. In this scenario, I actually just added on to the end of the URL, like it was index.aspx/random integer.png, right?
Nice.
And so then I would generate a page that would have this random integer, and it would force the user to go to that page. The response would be cached. So there's lots of ways you can approach this. Just to, take it away, to summarize it, like you said, if there's like a caching parameter in there, that's a good indicator that there may be some weird caching issues, in the URL. The %3f to trick it, the path, they could be caching based off of different directories in the application. And they also could just be caching by just, they don't care if you have anything random at the end of the URL in the path. So you could just add on / whatever.png and get it cached that way. So those are some methods to try out.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. Real quick, you want to talk about World Cup and maybe the upcoming event?
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, that's right. Upcoming event. I'll skip right to that one. So we got Joel and I both got an invite for. Can we say?
I think we can say location.
It's for LA, which I'm excited about because I have never been to LA. So that's going to be fun. We are going to be dealing with some hardware components, which I think we can also say.
Yeah.
So that should be lots of fun. Really
Pretty
looking
dope.
forward to it.
I mean, it's been only a couple of months since we last did some dope hardware hacking bugs on this same target, actually.
It's about time, man.
I think it's going to be cool. Hopefully it's some new devices and some new attack surface for us to poke at. I imagine we'll be getting that stuff pretty soon. And I'm excited to see you in LA. I haven't been to an event in person in a long time because of just scheduling and stuff. And even this one, I'm flying by the seat of my pants to different flights and stuff. But I'm gonna make it work.
I'm so glad you said you could make it. You said it was gonna be real close, and then that's gonna be awesome, man.
Yeah, I gotta be on the other side of the country the day after the event, but I'm gonna take a red eye and make it happen.
Oh my gosh, are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh my god. All right, we'll talk more about that off air. I gotta get the details on that. World Cup. How's it going for you, man?
It's been pretty good. So I've been spending some time with a couple of our team members. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we can say who's on the team, but I'll just say some of our team members. We've been poking at some of the targets. So for those who don't know, I think we can say who the targets are, right? So
yeah, they're public.
Yeah, Stripe, OpenSea, Yahoo, Epic Games, and Shopify, all very large, big programs, great bounties and everything. Super challenging, super hardened targets, but I know our team has already found a bunch of really cool stuff from you specifically, we've been poking hard to try and find some really dope bugs on some of those other targets, it's all about managing time and trying to spend your time in hacking energy efficiently. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure, man. I actually just got a message during the podcast that they fixed the bug already, under 24 hours.
Wow.
So
if that tells you how severe it is.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for that one, man. It's the only bug I've got so far, though. So nothing too crazy as of yet. But I think we'll get there. And I know some of the guys on our team have some really solid leads. Got themselves access to some, let's just say, some advantageous scope. And so I think we'll find some really good stuff there.
Yeah, it should be really cool. So hoping to see. I hope they do some sort of recap or something afterwards.
Yeah, me too.
To talk about everything that happened.
Yeah, for sure. We'll definitely keep everybody in the loop about the World Cup happenings. It's been a really fun event so far to work with some of the newer hackers as well. So for any of you that are looking to get into the bug bounty space, definitely feel free to apply next year when they do the World Cup. It's definitely a great learning experience for everyone involved.
Yeah, I know it's a little weird for the U.S. because we're such a massive country, but I can imagine for the smaller countries, getting connected with other people who are hackers within your region is pretty cool and pretty awesome to get to know people because you could get connected with another USA hacker like me and Reiner, and we're thousands of miles apart. So it's it's not exactly I'll just drive an hour and hang out. We can do some hacking locally,
not
but
yet,
maybe
man.
if you're in,
until you get your ass over to Virginia.
Soon.
All right, man. Cool.
I need the Fed to lower the interest rates first.
Yeah, dude. For serious. Well, this is a bug bounty podcast. I'm not.
Oh yeah, my bad.
You almost triggered me, Joel, about to start talking about the interest rates. But we'll save the.
You can nerd bait me, nerd snipe me, but I can finance snipe you.
There you go. Nice. Cool. I think that's all I got. Is that a wrap?
That's it for me.
All right. Peace.
Peace.